Welcome to episode 6 of Matire Gemi, a bi-weekly podcast where we help you learn about your Agikoyo culture, history, and heritage in English and in a fun, light-hearted way. I'm Njeri Diho, your anchor, and I'm here with Waiyaki Shaga, your cultural enthusiast who continues to immerse himself in learning the ways of our ancestors. So I'm really excited about today's episode. We recorded it about 10 minutes ago. The reason this episode is so exciting is that it's all about you. A couple of weeks ago, we asked you to submit your questions, and we gathered all your questions into 8 key topics. And today, we go into those topics in a really fun, lighthearted way. So guys, I'm excited, and sit back, grab a pen, relax, and indulge yourself in all the 8 topics that we discussed today. So Waiyaki, are we ready to roll?
Yes, we are.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
So what are we doing today? Because today's a special episode.
Today's a special episode. We're going to answer people's questions.
Okay.
And we haven't done that before, so this is kind of new for us.
This is a really good episode. I'm really excited because we got a lot of questions, right? Mm-hmm. So we had to figure out how to kind of consolidate them. And we've consolidated them into, I think, 8 questions.
Okay.
Which is really good because then we get to hit a lot of different topics that people had. So maybe I should start by saying thank you to everybody for sending us the questions. And guys, for your engagement, for listening. You guys are so passionate. It just really gives us a reason to keep doing this, right? It just drives us. So thank you for your passion, your engagement, your participation, for sharing this. So today's session is all about you, right?
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Njeri, for being the engaging person on the podcast. Because my lack of social media presence.
What are you talking about? You're the one who always gives the terrible answers.
Wow.
That I want to go delete. But I just allow you to have some say here and there,
But honestly, I mean, you're more engaging than me on social media, so I'd like to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you.
So let's go into the first question, because we figured out we're so awesome. Okay, let's seriously jump in, right?
Okay, let's do it.
So I think the first question that people had to do with Mehirega. And this one I think was a big one, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what drove it was people going back to do their ancestral story. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when people are going to do their ancestral story, they would, for example, not know what their Mehirega was. But sometimes they would. Mm-hmm. But sometimes they'd be confused based on marriage. Mm-hmm. So Waiyaki, the first question we had, a very common theme was, if when a woman gets married, right, does she lose her father's Mehirega?
So, Njeri, that's a good question. And, to simplify, when a woman gets married, she belongs to her father's Mehirega still. And that's why they call a woman Modowaja, because she comes from another family, right? So, but once dowry is paid for her, then she belongs both to her dad's Mehirega, and now she has been birthed into this new Mehirega. Spiritually.
Okay.
Because in Rorashio, when 2 people are getting married, the man is birthed into the woman's family as a child, and the woman is birthed into the man's family as a child.
Okay.
And so when she's introducing herself, she would say, I'm Njeri, my Mehirega is the Ajiro, but I am married to the Aboi.
Okay. So a woman always retains both Mehirega, right? Mm-hmm. But you mentioned a nuance, which is the payment of Rorashio. Bride price, right? Loosely. So what if bride price is not paid? Then what Mehirega does the woman belong to?
She still belongs to her own Mehirega.
Her father's Mehirega.
Her father's Mehirega. That's the Mehirega that she would never lose.
Okay.
Because that Mehirega was given to her at birth.
Got it. But then she's not adopted into her husband's Mehirega. So she really doesn't belong technically into that family.
She doesn't belong. And that's why Rorashio is very important. And, we'll talk about Rorashio in another topic. So you find that today, you could be married into a family, but you were never Rashiriyad for. And then, unfortunately, your husband dies and they kick you out of the family.
What?
That happens all the time, obviously because of land and everything.
Okay.
But Rorashio, one of its main functions is it cements and keeps that marriage firm, that if anything happened to the man, you belong to that muherega.
Right.
Because all your processes of marriage have gone, all the ceremonies of marriage have been carried out in a dutiful way.
Right, according to the Agikoyo traditions. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? And I think it takes me back to, like, if you want to stay connected to your culture, again, everybody makes their own decisions. All we do is we share the information as we know it, right? Mm-hmm. So as a woman and you're married, and it may be something worthwhile. If your Rorashio was not paid, it's a worthwhile pursuit, potentially, to actually go down that path. But then the other question has to do with children, right? So if the Rorashio was not paid, and therefore the woman does not, quote unquote, spiritually belong to her husband's moherega, then where do the children land? Which moherega do they belong to?
So that's a nuanced question, because the moherega, so by birth they get the father's moherega, but they don't belong to that moherega fully until he pays Rorashio.
Ah.
So Rorashio is very important. And in fact, if unfortunately a relationship was to fall apart and that woman, say she had 2 children and she separated from her husband and her Rorashio had never been paid, had never been started, maybe they were just living, together.
Right.
And then another man comes and pays dowry or Rorashio, then those children belong to the new man.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's fascinating. So, I see. So, if I see, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And what it tells you is that Rorashio is a very serious commitment, and it's not something to play when you are going to go through the Rorashio process, or if you're living with a man or a woman and nothing has happened traditionally. There could be consequences like that, for example, where if the relationship doesn't pan out, and as a man you're gonna lose your children if she gets married again.
Right. Okay, so not only do you honor your wife through paying Rorashio, and you honor our traditions through Rorashio, right, spiritually, but you also honor your children, right? Because in a sense, you root them into your family's Rorashio, which then also roots and anchors your future generations from there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. This brings us nicely into one of the next questions, which had to do with divorcing.
Okay.
Because you brought that up, right? Which is one of the questions we kept hearing was, let's say a woman, we know that in our generation, there was a lot of divorce. There may not have been as much in our parents' generation, but there's a lot of it in our generation. So let's assume 2 individuals were married and then they went through divorce, right? But the man had actually gone through the process traditionally on paying Rorashio on the woman. To her family, and they divorce, and now this woman goes and is marrying somebody else. Can her family receive a second Rorashio?
So that's a good question and a very deep question. So I'm going to assume that the woman in question who has divorced, or who has been divorced, or who has initiated divorce, the divorce is going through the courts. But she has been Rashiriyad all through until the traditional wedding, right? So that's a very complex situation, because even if you go through divorce in court, you're still married traditionally.
Okay. Spiritually.
Spiritually, yeah. So your families are still tied together.
Okay.
So if that woman goes ahead and starts a new relationship and maybe even starts living with a new man, that is adultery. It's considered adultery and it's something that's forbidden. Yeah, so
So the answer can't be that a woman cannot divorce, right? Because those options certainly have to be on the table depending on the circumstances and the relationship. So
Absolutely.
then how do you address that?
So, the Agekoyo are, I don't want to say, this podcast has been talking about the beauty of the Agekoyo culture, but, we are human and we are not infallible. So some relationships don't work and they have to be, so to speak, unresolved. So they have to be like the seal that went into the marriage has to be unsealed. And that is a long and very difficult process because, as you can imagine, in our last question, we talked about the fact that the man acquires his children through Rorashio.
Right.
And so if this man had these children and he had done what he needed to do for this woman, it would be very difficult for him to let go of his children, because if this woman goes and gets married, then those children would cease to belong to him.
Okay.
Like, this woman literally would have to leave the children with the man if she was if the marriage was to be unresolved and the man said, I'm not letting go of my children, if she was to go and get married again, she would have to leave without her children.
Or technically, they would still stay tied to her husband's mohirega, her ex-husbands, not her future husbands.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so, these processes were done and they're still done up to today, which is called koragodoni. But, koragodoni, when you have two families that have come together through a long process of getting to know each other and seeing these children come together in marriage, is such a difficult thing to untie socially, So, but it can be done. And there's people who know the processes and the ceremonies that need to be done to do this, to make this possible.
Okay, so it's about seeing the right person to unseal the whole thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it's not as easy as going to the court and getting a divorce.
Okay, it's beyond that. I mean, clearly you have to get a legal divorce, right? Based on the laws of the land. But you also need to get a spiritual divorce based on their Yokoyo traditions. That's what I'm hearing.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so, at the end of the day, what I would like people to take away from this is there's traditional marriage is, if you choose to go through it, it is very serious. It's like the song from Kamaru when he sang the song Togatigida Nyonegekuo. That's how serious the Agekoyo marriage is.
Could you translate those words?
Togatigida nyo, we shall be separated by death.
Yeah.
Gekuo is death. And so it's really important to know what you're getting into and to know if you have difficulties that cannot be resolved, how to go through the process of koragodoni.
Okay, that's interesting. So what if you were not married to a Kikuyu? Do the children then stay in? Can you take your children? Because spiritually, Rorashio was not paid.
So if you're not married to that's not a question I can answer, because it would be up to the traditions of where the woman was married.
Or the culture you married into.
Yes, and there are so many different cultures. So actually, just to add to, that's a good question. Once a woman gets married to a non-Kikuyu, she ceases to become a Kikuyu. Like, she's a Kikuyu in language, but really she takes on the mohirega of whatever tribe, whatever traditions that they go through.
The identity of it. That's why even
exactly.
like historically, let's say the Kikuyu went and raided the Maasai, right? And vice versa, right? And brought forward women and children. They became a Kikuyu even if their birth was Maasai, for example.
Exactly. And actually, when they were brought by the Agikoyo, they had to be birthed spiritually. They had to go through the process of that spiritual birth so that they can be adopted to be in that muherega of where they were at the time.
Okay, interesting. Okay, great. All right, so then I think we should move on to the next topic, which has to do with, let's keep on this marriage sexuality theme, right? I'm going to move us a little bit into sexuality, but I'm telling you, we're going to do a podcast at some point, an episode on sexuality within the Agikoyo, because I think it's a very important topic. But for the sake of today, one of the questions we got had to do with homosexuality in the Agikoyo culture. Was it normal? Was it forbidden? I mean, I've heard stories of women marrying women. So can you talk to us about homosexuality?
So that's a good question. And so homosexuality was a mogiro. So it was forbidden. And so the reason is, and if you go back to our discussions on ire and ireri, is for every Kikuyu life, man or woman, they wanted you to acquire those two things, which included, being able to get children, right? And so homosexuality was seen more as a curse, because then what happens is, especially for men, if you were a homosexual, then you probably were not going to acquire children.
I see the logic, right? And the logic was, if I remember from our different episodes, was part of the reason to be a Mogekoyo, and the definition of wealth was children and building your lineage, right? And that if you were homosexual, then you could not build your lineage. You could not continue your family's lineage. I see. So from that perspective, right, then it was considered a Megiddo.
It was, and then also
Amogiro.
Amogiro, yes. No, Megiddo is many.
I know. I was clarifying because
Plural.
You ruined my reputation about my knowledge of Kikuyu. By the way, guys,
I haven't seen anything bad said on the internet about you and your terrible Kikuyu.
My Kikuyu is excellent. I'm just, letting people discover this slowly. Anyway,
Yeah. So also to continue, sexuality in the Agikoyo culture was not something light and to be taken lightly. So it was the sexual act was an act of creation. It was seen as a miracle. And even when a man was going to have sex with his wife, it was not just, like random. It was planned. So, things like homosexuality, abortion, and some of the things we have seen that have come, they came with the westernization of our culture. They really never existed back then because, and we're going to talk about initiation and the stages of a Mogekoyo. Each stage of a Mogekoyo's life was planned from birth to initiation, to marriage, to becoming an elder, or to becoming a woman of a certain level. And there are those levels which we'll discuss. So we started to see homosexuality very recently, and it's, it came with westernization.
Okay, so I'm going to ask two questions. I'm going to make a statement and then I'm going to ask a question, right? Because I think that there's a debate, and I don't know if that's the debate for us to have here, because I don't have the answers, and I don't lean on any side personally, which is, homosexuality. Was it there before? Was it after? Are you born gay, or is it something that's culturalized into you? I don't know the answers to that, and I don't think that's what we're answering today. Today we're simply looking looking at it in terms of the perspective of the Agikoyo back then.
Absolutely.
Right, without us casting any kind of moral judgment, right? Because that's not who we are or what our intention is here. So, but then it raises the question of, I know that women married women, right? So then how are we saying that homosexuality was forbidden when we allowed women to marry other women?
That's a good question. So, I've seen that issue discussed a lot on the internet, and a good friend of mine said, yeah, women used to marry women back then. But, the thing is, so the Mogekoyo always had a way to solve issues. So, like we spoke earlier about Rorashio and the fact that when a woman has been rashirioed by the man, right? She belongs, and the man has paid dowry and has gone through the gurario, which is the final step in the process of marriage, right? What happens is that woman now belongs in that home. And so back in the day, so a woman could have been married to a man, and for a man to have, for the most part, men had one wife, right? A few men had many wives because they had wealth, right? So if, for example, a woman had passed her childbearing years and she had maybe 5 children and her husband died, right? So, and once a woman's husband dies and she has gone through all the processes of marriage, she can't marry again. They're married in this life and in the afterlife.
Right. Okay.
So she wasn't going to go and get married again. So she could bring in a woman to continue, especially if the man was wealthy, to continue acquiring wealth. So, and then this woman would get her children from a man of that muherega.
I see.
And she would even bear children like the man was kind of alive, so to speak. Like the children would still be named in the order that they were supposed to be named.
Oh, I see.
So it was nothing sexual about bringing another woman to the house or to build her another home, because each woman had their own nyoba. It was more about, we have 100 acres of land. I'm the only woman, and I have maybe young children. I need a helper. I need somebody to help me take care of these children. I need somebody to help me till the land.
Yeah.
And I cannot go out there and get married again.
Right. Okay, so it was about economics and lineage.
Lineage and acquiring wealth.
Yeah.
Economics, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I've always wondered about that. That's a very insightful. Thanks for sharing. So, you talked about initiation a little bit, and that was one of the other questions we got. So, and people asked, what is the importance of initiation in our culture? Right? Like, why is it anything major? Because candidly, what I remember is when people finished standard 8, they kind of would go to OC, they'd go to the hospital, they'd get the guys, not the girls, that get initiated or circumcised, and everybody would call it a day, right? So what's the significance of initiation in our culture?
It's funny you mentioned that. We used to call it going to Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if, some of the guys who are my age probably used to call it the same thing. But, initiation was, and we'll talk about this in the next podcast, but it was a stage in a man's life. And back then when they used to initiate girls, it was a stage in a young girl's life. And initiation used to happen, not like the way it happens today. It used to happen when men were close to 18 years of age.
Okay.
Because what happened, it was preparing them to do 2 things. One, to get a family of their own, and to go to become warriors. So it was a step, a maturity step that was preparing them to come out of their boyish tendencies and to understand, the meaning of life. What are the responsibilities of a young man? How do you go acquire wealth?
Oh, so what I'm hearing you say is that it was not just the act of circumcision like we know it in our current generation, well, maybe as I know it, right? But there was other things around that step that rounded out the young man or the young woman to step into the next stage of their life.
Next stage of their life, exactly. And the kirera for circumcision is long, and it is detailed because it has so many steps where the young man would go to their maternal uncle, who is the mama, and ask for a blessing before going to initiation, which had many meanings and many purposes, many spiritual aspects that were tied to what the young man had to do. And so it was a very spiritual event that raised the young man from boyhood or boyishness and being a child to being a young man who now understands what it takes to be. They would go through classes where they would be taught about sex and warriorhood, what it means to be a young man, what you're supposed to do, how you carry yourself. And they even had a mentor through the entire process. And even the person who was conducting the initiation became their spiritual father as well. The person who was responsible, the person ordained to go through that process. So it was very educational and spiritual. And it awakened the young men who were going through that to the responsibilities of life early. And so, you can contrast that with, the sort of initiation that my generation went through. We went to the hospital and boom, that was it. Did we get any formal education on sex or what it takes to be a young man? What's important in life? We didn't get that. I think that was a failure on our parents' generation in leaving that responsibility to the schools we went to or the church, Sunday school,
right?
And hence when the women ask today, where did all the good men go? I would say that has a very big part to do with that, missing that process.
Yeah, that's actually huge. And even if I was to add to it, so sometimes you'll get together with your girlfriends and you'll just talk about, like we do sometimes, right? We'll talk about men, right? And sometimes we'll talk about like the...
You talk about men all the time.
That's not true. But sometimes... we'll talk about, for example, the Tanzanian culture, and I don't know which tribe within the Tanzanians, and how, either their mother or their grandmother would really start to groom them in terms of how to be a woman, right? Even including topics on sexuality before they actually became a woman, right? So there was that kind of grooming that happened. And I do believe that the same happened in our culture. I know we don't have to go deep into it because we have a different episode, but not only was that missed, those classes and education missed with the men, but it was also, I think it's called Kirira, Kia something. It was also missed with the women. So our parents' generation, whom we really love and adore, they did the best that they could. They were fantastic parents, right? But our parents' generation dropped that, right? And so we, as in our generation, we stepped into this without a full understanding of what it takes to be a man or a husband, a woman or a wife, right? So we're just trying to figure it out as we go through it.
Yeah, and it's sad. And our parents' generation, I have to qualify this by saying they grew up at a very difficult time.
Exactly.
A time of change, a time of, resistance to the colonial rule.
Being penalized for following our culture.
Absolutely.
Right?
So it was very difficult time. And so maybe they didn't know any better.
Right. They did their best, right? This is not a condemnation of that generation, but it is a call for our generation to be aware of what happened so that we can start building in solutions to the gaps that we see today.
Yeah, because, we have to pass these things to our children.
Right, exactly. All right, Waiyaki, so let's go into the next question. And this one was very fascinating. It had to do with, actually, I'll stick on the theme of children. Right, which had to do with we had people say, wow, when I listened to the episode about Gemi, I was so flabbergasted and blown away by the power of Gemi. But I did not say Gemi on my children. How do I correct this? We got this question a lot. How would you answer that?
No, I think that's a fairly simple. There's a fairly simple solution. If you've ever attended any traditional Kikuyu wedding, they always talk about Gemi Kahe and Gemi Kairetu. So Gemis are said in all occasions that are celebratory for a Mugekoyo. So if you have your child's birthday, you should say Gemis on that day.
Before cutting the cake.
Exactly. Instead of singing happy birthday.
I mean, it makes sense. Or both. You could do both.
Yeah. If your daughter or your son is graduating, say the Gemis that associate with their gender.
Right.
If you have, a family gathering, if you have any occasion that is an occasion of happiness, you should say Gemis.
I think that's so powerful because when we realize that Gemis are putting an intention out into the universe, that the Gemis are actually a prayer, right? And you realize the 5 meanings of Gemi and how deep and special they are. I mean, it totally makes sense to say Gemi in every occasion because we are simply putting out a blessing, a prayer, right? And remember, that prayer comes with the weight of generations behind it.
It does.
It's not just a simple 3-word prayer. It comes with the weight of our ancestors, right? And you're putting that blessing into the person, old or young, to whom you're saying the Gemi. I think that's beautiful, Waiyaki.
I think, every birthday, just say a Gemi for your children.
Yeah. Even your own birthday, because you're a child of someone. All I know is that on my birthday, I need to be hearing Gemis. Okay, guys. So still on the theme of children, there was another question we got which had to do with children born out of wedlock. Well, that was not very common in our parents' generation. It certainly is quite common in our generation, right? And so the question we had was, if a child was born out of wedlock, right, and then they're named after the mother's father or the mother's brother, right? But they were not spiritually adopted into that side of the family, the mother's father or the mother's brother, right? What are the consequences?
That's a good question, and it's a common topic, and all of us know someone who has a child out of wedlock, and we know that. There are siblings, our friends, our cousins. It's fairly common, right? It was not the right thing to happen, right? So to take it back a little bit, having a child out of wedlock for a woman is, in Kikuyu it's called ihuriariko.
Okay.
Basically, it's like, you are a young girl and, you are still cooking with your mom and then all of a sudden you're pregnant, right?
Okay.
And so it was a very serious matter because, we never encouraged sex before marriage as a culture. And so it was seen as if it was, I hope I can use the right words to describe this. Girls used to sleep in the woman's house.
Okay.
The young girls.
Okay. In their mom's hut?
In their mom's hut, right?
Okay.
So the mom's hut, the nyoba, which is the woman's house, that is where the act of creation happens. Like that's her altar,
Okay.
which is very sacred.
Okay.
So what happens if a girl gets a child out of wedlock? She sullies that altar.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll talk about this maybe later and in depth. But what happens is she sullies that altar, and then it would be assumed, because the only man who goes to that hut is the father. So if it wasn't the father's responsibility for that pregnancy, whose is it, right? So the father would have to do a ceremony to cleanse the home
Okay.
and the altar. So it so happens that I wanted to paint that picture because having a child out of wedlock is a very serious issue that is affecting many homes and that needs to be addressed. So to answer your question so if a child is born out of wedlock, two things can happen. The man who gave birth, who was responsible for this pregnancy, can say, hey, I'm going to take care of this child, right?
Okay.
So, and then the child is named after, or the man might say, hey, I propose marriage to you. I can't do it now, but I'll make you an honest woman in the future. So name the child after my father or my mother, depending on the child, right? That can be that's one way it has happened, right?
Okay.
Another way is maybe the man absconds. And if he absconds and disappears, the woman who is pregnant decides to name her
Parents.
her parents,
Her father.
or her brother,
parents,
or her cousin.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with naming the child after one of your family members. But the most important thing is, like we said before, there's no child who didn't have a muheriga. And so the process in that situation is to remove the child from his ancestral ties.
From his father's ties.
Biological father's ties.
Correct.
Through there's a ceremony that is done to remove the child, because that child brings those good and bad spiritual vibes from that family.
Right.
Good and bad spiritual energy.
Right.
That child is tied spiritually to the ancestors biologically. And if there's anything that is following the child, it's going to follow you too.
Yeah.
So, it could be that if this woman is not getting married again, then that child be adopted by her brother, maternal brother, right? And adopted spiritually to be given the family's muheriga.
I see. So those are the processes that should happen, right? So either the father, who maybe, let's assume you're separated, right? The father should do the spiritual processes in order to have the children belong to him and his muheriga, or the mother should have that process done through her side of the family, so that the children end up with roots.
With fatherhood.
Yes, with fatherhood, spiritually.
Spiritually.
In terms of their roots from a muheriga perspective. That's actually that's really interesting, considering that we have a lot of single parents right now. So I think that's a really, really interesting topic. So if someone wanted to go through the process, right, where would they go? Like, where do they even start to find somebody to do the process?
No, those people exist within the Agekoyo leadership. There's people that they can find that will be able to walk them through the process of, because a lot of cases are unique.
Yeah.
You could have there's just so many different nuances that can exist. But the people who conduct these traditional ceremonies exist, and they're there.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Which, by the way, it takes me back a little bit to Rorashio. We'll talk about this, and then we'll go to the final question, which had to do with back to the Rorashio. So let's assume, and we get this question a lot, where people say, "In my family, dowry was not paid." And people are concerned about the impact on them and future generations. But we even got a very specific one where someone said, in my case, right, or in this case, their mother's parents had passed away.
And her dowry wasn't paid.
So who is the dowry paid to then, if the parents have passed away? If you want to go back and pay dowry that was never paid, like close those debts, who do you pay it to if the parents have passed on?
That's a good question. So, we've talked about this before, Njeri, where we know Rorashio, at a high level, it's a union between two families, spiritually. So, if your mom's dowry was never paid and her parents, who are your maternal grandparents, are not there, what do you do? So it's very, very possible that your mom's dad had brothers. And maybe those brothers are dead.
Yes, what if they are? But if they're not, you go to the brothers first.
You'd go to the brothers.
Okay.
But if they're dead, then they had descendants, like their sons. So there was a process of figuring out who this Rorashio would go to, because at the end of the day, who is the Rorashio tying you with? It's tying you with those ancestors of that family.
Right.
So has to be a person, cousin, second cousin of that family, a son who was born from that man's brothers or sisters,
right,
that can receive the Rorashio.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good.
So and that, any problem that has to do with family past debts, that's how you would address them. Because actually, just, you bring up an interesting point. Debts in our culture are very serious because, so a debt is called digereri. So digereri is something that has not been finished to be paid.
Okay.
And what that causes is, it causes what is called dowari. So have you heard of dowari?
I mean, no, but I'm thinking it's connected to illness, korowara.
Korowara, yeah. So dowari comes from the word toara.
Okay.
And so if you refuse to toara, you will get a dowari. So it's very different from morimo.
Okay.
Because morimo comes from orimo, which is foolishness.
Okay.
So if you go out in the winter without any protective gear, you're being a kerimo. So you can get a cold, pneumonia, whatever. But dowari is very serious because it comes from kuagago toara, which means not taking the debts that you owe. So I just wanted to add that point based on the debt.
Yeah.
And a lot of dwaris come from matrimonial debt.
And dowari is, can you convert that into English? An English word?
It's sort of an illness.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Interesting.
It's an illness that can only be resolved by paying a debt.
That's why even in the past we've talked about alcoholism, those kind of things being tied to duari, some of these ancestral debts
Even
that were never
even
paid.
depression.
Even depression. Interesting, right? So I think it begs the question, right? If you have some of these things that today were not common in the Agikuyu culture, but today we consider them common. You know, whether it's mental health patterns that are not part of your family, but now they're happening, whether there's alcoholism that was not part of the pattern, but that's happening. It really does beg the question for you to take a step back and ask, are there any debts that have not been paid ancestrally, spiritually in my lineage?
I absolutely. And because those debts basically are being demanded of you, and if not, then your family is just on the path of extinction. Because you find if you have sons who are alcoholics and they don't start a family, don't become responsible, don't bear children, what happens to your lineage?
Yeah. I think that's a powerful, right, question, right? Because the logical side of me, the science-based, educated side of me would say, there's something genetic there, right? That it's a genetic trait, it's a disease, right? But what you're challenging us to do, and I believe in being open-minded and always exploring something, what you're challenging us to explore is, if that is happening in your family, right? Perhaps it's genetic. We're not here to cast that definition. But perhaps you should also do some exploration, because there could be something energetically, right, that you have also not explored, and why this could be something new that's happening in your family. That's basically what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, Waiyaki, I think it's time for us to go to the last question, which has to do with Odo Ugo and Modo Mogo. This one was very popular, right? Especially when we talked about the Daga and the Ajiro, right? And the fact that a lot of them have that within them, right? So the question is, how did one become a Modo Mogo? How does that happen? Are you born with it? Do you go for training? Like, how does this whole thing happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, which, I'm not qualified to answer, but I can give you a high-level answer. So, to step back, every person who is born with an ogo.
With a gift.
With a gift. It's their oge, it's their wisdom that they're given, right? And so I would assume that the question you're asking is the people who are medicine men, medicine women, diviners, mystics, seers. So there are families that even today have names that are associated with Ogo. So, if you know a person called Keoni, Wabogo, Gedaiga. Gedaiga is actually, if I can define that for you, is herbal, is drugs or herbs.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Medaiga is like drugs.
Okay.
Like herbs that are used for healing.
Right.
Or a name like Muragori. So Muragori is a person who would decipher what the Bogos are saying. So, and Bogos are the pebbles of a medicine man.
Right.
That they would use to see the situation that is at hand. And so, and even in the Bible, they do talk about these things, about diviners and seers, right? So there were families that knew that within them, they had this gift based on knowing yourself.
Right.
So if you know you're a Mojiro or you're a Muedaga, you know that your children or your descendants are going to carry that wisdom.
Right.
Right? So it was seen early in children, or it manifested after initiation, when you could see this gift manifest in some people, right?
Yes.
So
just the same way you can see the gift of, say, math in a child.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that person would have to be apprenticed and be able to be given ordained, which in Kikuyu we call Gokunoro, that gift would have to be given by a Modomogo.
Oh, that's so interesting. So today, if you sense that within yourself you have some of these spiritual powers, right? Which are beautiful, diviner, seer, medicine man, all medicine person, all these things, right? Then you do need to see another Mogo so that they can go kunura, mago kunore.
Mago kunore, exactly.
Interesting.
And these people are there.
Yeah. Okay, that's really fascinating. I have to tell you a little story. Because I think of myself as having medicine woman gifts.
Yes, you do. You absolutely do. And you don't know it. You just haven't been kunoroed.
I know. So I remember asking my dad once, was I born with a bogo in my hand? And he said no. So I started arguing with him, saying, I'm sure I was, you just didn't see it. But anyway, on a serious note, right, that's actually fascinating that if you start to see that you have some of these gifts within yourself, and it's something that you do want to explore, that the path, if you feel like it's part of your purpose here on earth, that the path does exist for you to apprentice and gokunoro, right? And to open up that gift so you can use it to serve.
Absolutely. And Jerry, we've seen some of the responses on our social media on some people who, in searching for themselves, have found that they have that gift.
Yeah.
So it's important for knowledge of self is very important. So, for example, how we talked about knowing yourself, like who are my parents, who are my ancestors. That's the beginning of knowing that, my grandmother was a Modomogo, or my grandfather was a great iron ore mason, right? So then you can actually start seeing the gifts you have and relating with that. Like if your grandfather or your father was an iron mason, just they had the gift of sculpting iron and you have it, that was your ogo.
Yeah.
So, you might decide to go and do something totally different in your life, but maybe that's your calling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, your calling, Jerry, could be a medicine woman because herbs, how they work, and that's a wisdom that is innate, that has been given to you and your family by God.
Right, yeah. I think that's fascinating, right? To recognize again that we all have an innate gift, a unique talent that cannot be taught. It comes within you, but it can be expanded, right? And so what you're saying is that if you do discover that you have some of these and you want to pursue that, there is a way for you to expand that, within our traditional processes. I think that's so beautiful, Waiyaki. And I think that covers, the 8 subtopics or topics, right, that we got a lot of questions in. So thank you so much for covering that. I think it has really opened our eyes and hopefully it's what our listeners were looking for. But next week or in the next episode, we go back to regular programming. So I guess my question for you, Waiyaki, is what is the next episode going to be about and where will it ultimately lead us? Because where this next episode will ultimately lead us is so exciting to me because it's a topic that people have been asking so many questions about. So what's the next episode about, Waiyaki?
No, I think we're going to talk about the stages in the life of a Mugikoyo. So we'll talk about the stages of a man's life and the stages of a woman's life. From childhood all the way to elder status.
Yeah. I think that's really good because ultimately it's going to take us through stages such as marriage. And I know we've got a lot of questions around Rurashio,
absolutely,
children, all that good stuff, right?
Yes.
So thank you again, Waiyaki. We really appreciate the episode. And to everybody, thanks for always tuning in. Thanks for your questions and have a fantastic 2 weeks until we see you next time. Thank you for listening and being present here with us today. We are grateful. You can find Matire Gemi on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to follow us. Our website is matire-gemi at simplecast.com. And this podcast was produced by Waiyaki and Njeri with sound design by Njengan Gigs. Thanks again, and please share this widely.